everybody, and welcome to the Katie Weaver Show. This is Katie. I'm your host. I'm so happy to be here. If you're listening live, it is the 26th of May at about 11 a.m. Pacific time. If you're listening to an archive or a replay, I want to welcome you to the show. And of course, if you're watching on the live stream, I want to welcome you as well. If you're listening and you'd rather watch, just head over to YouTube or Facebook, look for Katie Weaver Domestic Mystic, and you'll find my live stream there. Simple enough to do. But how's it going? How was your Memorial Day? If you're here in the States and that's something that you celebrate. Oh man, it's been a good one for us. Scott and I went camping. We left on Thursday, and we just went to one of our local favorite places, and tons of family. The kids came up on Friday, and then my sisters and their families, and my nephew Stone has a brand new fiance that has 3 kids, and so that was interesting. We haven't camped with little kids in a long time. It was fun. They're cute as hell. Funny kids. But yeah, definitely different than camping without kids. At any rate, we had a good weekend. The weather was absolutely beautiful. Chilly at night, gorgeous during the day. We tried something this time that I think we'll keep doing, and I think it's kind of interesting. As the matriarchs of our crew, my sisters and I, and our spouses have always been in charge of, every meal, right? And we always do a big communal breakfast. So everybody brings some breakfast stuff, and then each morning we make a plan about who has what, who's going to cook what, and we all cook and come together and share and have a big camping breakfast. In fact, camping breakfast is a prerequisite to our camping trip. Like, you don't show up without that stuff, right? But my sister Kara pointed out that our kids are all young adults now. And they all have jobs and lives and cars and houses and abilities, and that we should give them more responsibility than we are. So we decided to make the kids the breakfast party from now on. Man, did they rise to the occasion. Not only did we have our regular style traditional breakfast that we usually do, they added things like cinnamon roll pancakes and mimosas and biscuits and gravy, and they did all kinds of great stuff. So the idea was, you guys are in charge of it. You plan it, you buy it, you cook it, you clean it up. Us old folks are just going to eat breakfast and sit around and drink coffee and talk shit, which is what we did, and it turned out beautifully. So that was good. It's an interesting feeling here, once in a while. Letting the new guard take some stuff over and remembering that they can. In fact, the last 2 times we've camped, Scott has let Micah drive the motorhome home when we camped with the kids, and it was great. It's a little terrifying. I wouldn't drive it for any amount of money, but I'm little, and it's big. And so reaching everything, I don't know if I can. But at any rate, Micah drove it beautifully, which saves us a trip. So all of it, it's just good. Funny how, when your kids get to some point, you're like, oh, are they old enough to have sleepovers? Ooh. Then you get to a point that you're like, oh, are they really old enough to take driver's ed? And then they get to a point that you're like, are they really old enough to drive to a big city or another town? And then they get old enough that you're like, are they really ready to go to college and be out in the world by themselves? And the beat marches on. So now we're at a point that, are they old enough to be in charge of breakfast? And the answer is yes. Which is ridiculous. We should have done this a few years ago. But anyway, I was proud of them, the way they rose to the occasion and did an awesome job and just gave us some relief. It was really nice. Yeah. But anyway, we had fun. It was a great trip, and I'm happy to be home. I have filled the kiln this morning with bisqueware that I'm really excited to start glazing and playing with. But I also bisqued a few pieces of glass tools that I built, glass molds, out of clay. that I can take down to the glass room and do some really cool shit with. So I can't wait. I'm hoping by next week I have something to show you from those experiments, but we'll find out. I'm also teeming with excitement because there is this weekend here in my area a reptile fair, a reptile expo. And we're going and we're freaking out. We really, really want to buy a praying mantis. Have you seen all the fancy and cool praying mantises? They are amazing. So we're hoping that there's some bug people there because we really want a praying mantis. So we'll find out. Because Sunday is my 29th wedding anniversary. 29th! And we're going to, I told Scott I'd buy him a praying mantis for our wedding anniversary. Because that's what kind of weirdos we are. Oh, Lord. So we'll see. But I'm very excited for the Reptile Expo. I can't wait to see what they've got. I wanted to show you a couple of pictures that Matea took of Bruno this weekend. She came into my camper. I was still in bed, and Bruno was peeking up from under the bottom of the covers. You'll see the bottom of my foot if you look hard. But look at this baby. Can you even? And was just waking up. Is that not the sweetest little boy you've ever seen? No, I know it is. And you don't have to tell me his toenails need cut. I know that too. It's just trauma. He hates it really bad. I can't do it without a fight. He'll let Scott do it, but I know. But he's just so damn cute. Oh, thank you, Quelly. And hey, Spirit. Good to have you guys in the chat. So the last few weeks, I've talked about flowers and plants. I've been looking at the natural world and where it shows up in spiritual history. There's a lot, right? A lot of the natural world shows up in spiritual history because why wouldn't it? But we've talked about flowers, we've talked about plants in general, we've talked about several things, but this week I wanted to talk about insects. Probably because I have those damn praying mantises on the brain, but I wanted to talk about different insects and where they show up in historical spirituality and the way we see them now. So that was the topic of Luminous. I called this week's magazine The Field Guide to the Mystical Insect World. Insects are tiny creatures, ancient symbols, and strange spiritual comfort that humans have always found in wings, light, and transformation. There's a lot of it. A lot of it. When you look at the iconography from different eras of time and their spirituality, it intersects over and over and over. So we're certainly not going to talk about all of them today because we just simply wouldn't have time, but I'm going to talk about a few of the most prevalent ones. You know, to me, I mean, some of it has to be about beauty. I mean, it's hard to see a butterfly or a dragonfly or even a moth and not be taken by the beauty of their wings, of their symmetry, of all of them, right? So some of it's about beauty. Some of it's just about the energy of them, the magic of them, I think. But I read something a while recently that said that most women's first tattoo statistically will be a butterfly or a dragonfly, which cracked me up because my first tattoo was a dragonfly and my sister Christy's first tattoo was a butterfly. Like, I get this. But anyway, women tend to tattoo butterflies and dragonflies on their bodies. I also have a giant butterfly on my shoulder that I got down the road. But anyway, I just thought that was a funny statistic. Not because, and the point of the article I read was more like it's just cliche. Women don't know what to get, so they start with something like that. I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, maybe it is to some degree, but you have to consider the beauty and the magic that comes with butterflies and dragonflies and our draw to them. Just a thought. When I was a kid when I was in high school, our Spanish teacher was this really cool little old lady named Miss Hamblin. Miss Hamblin was, well, as it turned out, a lesbian, which was wild in the 90s in Rexburg, Idaho, but nobody knew that at the time. But Miss Hamblin traveled to Mexico extensively. She was a white lady, but she loved Mexico, loved their culture. She traveled to Mexico frequently. Anyway, she had this brooch that she wore to school most days that was an actual beetle, a living beetle that had all of this little gems and jewels and stuff that had been affixed to his back. And he would occasionally travel across her shoulder a little ways and then she'd kind of put him back. But she had that beetle for a long time. And she must have probably bought more than one over the years, right? Like, I can't imagine they lived that long. But she had this cool living beetle. I always thought that was kind of amazing. Now I think about it and wonder if that's kind of sad, actually. But when I was in high school, I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. But there was a connection, right? To that being, to that beetle, to that beauty. When I was a kid, we loved bugs. Loved them. I remember these bug boxes we had. They were like wood frames and then they had screen that had been stapled to them, like window screen. And they had these little doors that you could like slide open. And we'd put sticks and leaves and stuff in them and then we'd catch bugs and put inside of them so that we could observe them. We had our little magnifying glasses and our little tweezers and oh yeah, we were bug kids for sure. And I lived in a town where kids played outside a lot. We had a big garden, but we also had a big empty lot behind our house that had all kinds of bugs, right? And shit back there. So we were always out there catching bugs, looking at bugs, examining bugs. And then, of course, we were camping kids. So you'd go camping and there's bugs everywhere. But I've always had that connection to bugs and never a fear of bugs. I've never been afraid of bugs or spiders, anything like that. It's not how my mom was. And I think that a lot of times if your mother has a fear, you may have it too because it's just kind of ingrained in you, right? But my mom wasn't afraid of bugs or spiders. She'd catch them and look at them and examine them with us. She would catch snakes. I can remember my mom catching snakes and frogs when we were camping to show them to us and salamanders and stuff. Like these were not things she was afraid of. She was fascinated by them. And I kind of grew up that way. Now, if it's dead, that's a different, totally different. Because dead animals, dead bugs, dead anything would scare the absolute hell out of me as a kid. And even as an adult, still, I'm real squeamish about dead stuff. But the live stuff, yes, bring it on. But we also were not allowed to kill bugs. And I raised my kids the same way. Spiders in the house get caught and taken outside. Bugs too. Um, Outside, that's their house, and you are not out there killing them. My mom was not having it. Now, would occasionally something like an anthill have to be taken out? I'm sure that's true. But as a general rule, we weren't allowed to just be outside killing things just for the hell of it. That was absolutely against the rules. And that's how she always described it to us. This is their house. You don't come into their house and start killing them. That's not okay. And that's how I raised my kids too. But you weren't allowed to kill things. All right. Well, let's talk about a few different things. So let's start with butterflies, right? Butterflies are the soul with wings. Butterflies are so fascinating to us in the spiritual community. We've listened to this analogy for, well, till the end of time, or the beginning of time, I guess, that butterflies obviously go into their chrysalis. They dissolve into goo. Well, sorry, butterflies don't. Caterpillars go into their cocoon or their chrysalis. They dissolve into goo. They reform into a completely new animal, the butterfly, and then they emerge from that cocoon, a second birth. And have you ever seen a butterfly emerge from a cocoon? It is an amazing experience. They come out all wet, kind of like a baby chick coming out of an egg. They come out all wet and squished and discombobulated. And then as they dry, then they start to beat their wings a little bit to dry them and straighten them out. And I'm assuming maybe get a little blood from their bodies into their wings. And they'll keep beating those wings, holding on tight to whatever they're, perched on with their little feet. And they'll beat those wings until the wings are dry and full and fully expanded. And then eventually they'll flutter away. It's an amazing experience to watch. My mom was a teacher and she used to order chrysalis and keep them in her classroom and make a huge science experiment out of it. And the kids would get to, hopefully, sometimes it happened overnight, which is rude, but it happens. But they would get to, hopefully, literally watch a butterfly at some point emerge from its chrysalis. And then they'd keep it in their little butterfly keeper until it was strong and ready. And then they'd take it outside together and let it go. What a cool way for kids to learn science, to get to see it in action. So, across cultures, butterflies have represented rebirth, resurrection, spiritual awakening, and the soul itself. In ancient Greece, the word psyche meant both soul and butterfly. Isn't that cool? I did not know that. Butterflies were symbols of resurrection in Christianity and parts of Mexico. Monarch butterflies are connected to returning ancestral spirits during Dia de los Muertos. In Japanese folklore, butterflies may represent both the living and the dead. That's pretty interesting. But yes, you will see butterfly iconography everywhere. You'll see it in jewelry, you'll see it on clothing, you'll see it associated with every other part of design you can imagine. If you want a butterfly anything, you can find it, right? Let's talk about bees. God, I love bees. As you know, well, you may know, I've raised bees many times. We're currently not raising bees because the guy we get our bees from has lost half his hives and has had a real mite problem with the supplier of his bees. Oh, and the last two hives we bought died out. And honestly, it's just too damn expensive to keep doing it, which sucks because I think keeping bees is a sacred act. I think keeping bees is a good way to help try to support the bee population because, as we know, the general bee population, honey bee population, has been cut back exponentially over the last 50 years. And no more now, more than now, the bees have struggled a lot because of us, because of pesticides, because of pollution, because of overcrowding. So many reasons, but bees have had a hard time staying alive. But The last two sets of bees and queens we've bought were about $350. Then just to have them die out before one season is over, I just I can't justify keeping doing it. Maybe someday I'll get the energy back for it. But beekeeping is an amazing experience. But you think about bees, how often bees show up in spiritual history. So, ancient Egyptians, they associated bees with royalty and divine power. In ancient Greece, priestesses were sometimes called Melissae, meaning bees. In Celtic traditions, bees were believed to carry messages between worlds. You know, I was raised Mormon, and in the Mormon church, bees and beehives are really common iconography. Churches, temples, even like for example, my bank is beehive. Uh, in the hierarchy of the young women's organizations, the youngest group of girls are called beehives. Bees in the Mormon church represented community, cooperation, and industry. Though I do think it's kind of interesting because bees actually are a very sacred feminine energy. As we know, the queen bee rules the hive, and everything happens in the hive for her or because of her. Everything the hive, oh yeah, Beyonce's hive, yeah, interesting point. Uh, but everything that happens in the hive is because of what the queen is doing, how she's feeling, what stage of life she's in at the time. Everything in this ecosystem of a hive revolves around the queen bee. When you think about a beehive, when you can dissect one, if you've ever seen beeswax, I hope you have, perfect geometry. The hive has collective intelligence. They communicate through vibration and movement. A beehive is made up of thousands of individual tiny organisms that function as a living system. It's just fascinating. Bees detect polarized light. They navigate using the Earth's magnetic field. Hives form a nearly perfect hexagonal structure within all the beeswax. And humans have associated that with sacred geometry and energetic balance for time immemorial. And then, of course, that doesn't even begin to tap into honey that's been associated with healing, abundance, divine sweetness for as long as there's been people on this planet. Let's talk about moths. Moths, where you might consider butterflies to be creatures of the sun, moths are creatures of the moon. What happens at night when you turn on a light? You may get a bunch of moths around it, right? There's that old saying, like moths to a flame. I'm really drawn to the moonlight. I love flowers that open at night. I love the idea of moths moving by moonlight, navigating by moonlight. So, moths have been connected to intuition, hidden wisdom, psychic sensitivity, shadow work, and death and rebirth cycles. You might consider moths to be a representation of your shadow self. Those parts of you that you may be a little afraid of, those parts of you that you may have had put to sleep when you were a child because the people around you didn't like them. You think about death head hawk moth that literally has like a skull face on its back. That's not just fancy, that's true. They exist. They are very, very cool. I had an experience with a moth years ago. Thought it was a butterfly until I looked up the picture of it. It turned out to be a cabbage moth, like a light yellow with brown or black spots on her wings. Not very big little girl. So years ago, Thanksgiving Day, Christy and Rhonda open my front door and walk in the house. Now this is Idaho, remember? Thanksgiving Day, there's snow on the ground. It was frozen. It was freezing at night. It was very cold. And somehow, this cabbage moth flies in the house with them as they arrive. How? There should not have been any winged thing functioning. And yet there she was. And she flew right into the kitchen. And I had a little flowering plant in there, so she landed on the plant. And she lived in the kitchen window. But that plant was a waxy thing that I didn't think the flowers probably had much for her. So I started just making up some sugar water and I'd dip my finger in it and then I'd scoop her up and I'd hold her on my finger. And she had this long tongue that was like coiled up in her mouth, like a licorice roll. And she'd unfurl that whole long tongue and she'd wrap it around my finger and hold on with her little feet and perch on my finger and drink. It was the weirdest feeling in the world. Tiny and subtle, but obviously happening. Then she'd drink all of the water off of my finger and then she'd fly back to her plant. We did this every day for about 5 days. And then she one day just flew into the windowsill and I watched it happen. She flew up into the windowsill and her wings were just beating really rapidly and erratically, and then she just died just like that. I don't know why she was there. I always thought she was there for me for some reason, uh, but she was just there. But to hand feed a butterfly, well, you'll probably never get that opportunity, but I kind of hope you do, because that was a really amazing connection. Something similar-ish happened with a spider in my house one time, lots of years ago. Um, at one point, I noticed that above my desk, and this was in December, there was a cat face spider that had crafted a web, and she was living above my desk. And I was working on a book at the time, and I felt like she was there bringing creative energy to me. I love cat face spiders, love them. Obviously, I wasn't going to kill her because I don't kill spiders. I wasn't going to put her outside because that was a death sentence. It was December. So I agreed with her. You can live here and hang out, just don't leave this area. One day my cousin came over and was sitting at the kitchen table visiting with me, and she looked up and saw that cat face and she whipped her hat off and dove for her like she was going to beat her down with her hat. And I'm like, no, 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 no. She lives here. Leave her alone. She was like, there's a big spider in here. Yes, ma'am. She lives here now. I know she thought I was crazy. It's fine. I probably am. It's whatever. But anyway, but this spider's living up here and I'm wondering how in the world do I help the spider eat? Will she just starve to death? Is that just the natural life cycle at this point? Well, here's what's crazy. Right about the turn of the year, we ended up with a few flies in our house, which again, this is Idaho in the winter. It was well below freezing. There were no flies anywhere, outside or inside. We don't get flies in the house when it's too cold outside. I don't know if that you guys do, but we don't here. We don't. If it's too cold for stuff like that to exist outside, it's likely not inside either. And so flies would be unheard of to be buzzing around inside your house in January. But there they were. And so every few days, there were just like three of them, but every few days, Scott would stun one of them, like try not to kill it, but stun it with a hat or with a, you know, fly swatter thing. Then he'd take the fly and he'd throw it up into her web, and she would zoom over there and wrap it up and spend all day eating it. And then by the next day, it would be gone. And so we fed her, I think, three flies over the course of having her. And then one day in February, she just died and was gone. But before she did, she laid a shit ton of eggs. And that's where I found my limit because I decided having one cat face spider in the house was fine. Having thousands might be a bridge too far. So the eggs were removed and put outside, and it was still early spring. I can't imagine. I have no idea if they could survive or not. I don't know what happened with them. But I really didn't mind sharing my office with a cat face spider for the winter. Let's talk about dragonflies. Dragonflies look so alien. From further away, they look fancy. You have their long, thin bodies. You have their wings that almost look like stained glass. The way the butterfly wings refract light, the way they're designed, super fascinating. They've been studied forever. They still are. The way dragonflies move is really fascinating too. I have felt like dragonflies were a connection to the fae, or to the fairy world, or to the elemental world. And I always think about this with dragonflies that years and years ago, Scott and I wanted to hike a local ancient volcano. It's not very big, but well, big enough for me. And it has a hiking trail, but it's pretty steep. But I was determined to get to the top and go hang out in the caldera. So we went on this hike that again, I probably had no business going on, but I was determined to do it. And by the time we were about three-quarters of the way up, I was really struggling and thinking that I really might not make it to the top. And Scott's like, oh, come on, you've made it this far. Like, you wanted to get to the caldera. Let's go. You can do it. It was like dusk, and we were climbing up there so that we could watch the stars. Watch the, there was, we've hiked up there a couple of times to watch the Parasids, I think, meteor shower. Anyway, I noticed that I have a bunch of dragonflies that are circling me, just all around me. And I just felt like they were just empowering me, leading me to the top. They kept around me clear until I got to the top, and then they were gone. That's just always been amazing to me. I just had those dragonfly companions when I needed them the most, and it helped me get to where I needed to go. But maybe an even more amazing experience with dragonflies was mm, probably 15 years ago or so. My cousin Amy, her best friend's name was Brooke, and Brooke was all of our friend. Brooke was cool as hell. Everybody loved Brooke. Brooke had the most horrible endometriosis of anyone I ever knew. And every single month when her period would start, I mean, she would be debilitated in bed for days in hell. Was she getting good medical? I'm guessing not. Brooke was gay, and Brooke's family pretty much tossed her when she turned 18 because they couldn't tolerate the thought, I guess, of having a gay child. And so she probably wasn't getting good medical because she didn't have any support and she was a young adult. But at any rate, so every month Amy would text me, hey, Brooke is in bed. Can you help out? And I would do distance Reiki sessions on her every month to try to help. And it did help, but she needed Probably a hysterectomy, honestly, but what do I know? Anyway, life was tough for Brooke. Brooke's dad died of cancer when she was in high school. And Brooke's dad was really the only person in her family that accepted her at all. And so she missed her dad desperately, and life was hard. So at any rate, when Brooke was 25, she finally said she just simply couldn't take any more of the pain she was in, and she took her life. And it was a very hard and heartbreaking time. And her family treated her death the way they treated her life, like they were ashamed of her, which was incredibly sad in so many ways. But also, Brooke was an amazing person. She was funny and darling and gifted. She was a beautiful musician. She played the guitar. There were so many amazing things about Brooke, and her family couldn't see past being gay. And that was it for them. But then they couldn't see past suicide because in their religion that was such a sin. So Brooke didn't get a funeral. Brooke got a graveside, which is actually pretty typical. It used to be. I think it's gotten a little better, but it used to be pretty typical in Mormon communities. In case of a suicide, a lot of times there wouldn't be a funeral. There'd be kind of a quiet graveside, and that would be all there was. Which, you know, families have the right to do things their way, but this was just sad. And with Brooke especially, Brooke had a huge circle of friends. She had moved away from here and had been living in Salt Lake for most of her adult life. And when Brooke, so anyway, she had a lot of friends in Salt Lake and in Utah that wanted to attend her service. And somehow her family tried to just have a little graveside that nobody knew about. But some of her siblings thought that was shit and that her friends should have the opportunity to attend her service. So they had kind of leaked the service out that they should get to come to the graveside. So anyway, the graveside was this interesting mix of her family that was just, oh goodness, so stuffy. And of course, they were devastated too. It was just a horrible situation. But then all of these friends of hers that were like the polar opposites of her family. But we went because we loved Brooke and because Amy is like a sister to me. And she was so beyond devastated. We had to be there for her. So anyway, I'm telling you this whole story because of what happened at the graveside. It was so tense and weird because there were so many people there that were kind of unwelcome and not invited that just wanted to be there so badly. We were in the more invited group, but it didn't matter to me. Um, what was amazing is that on top of the casket, they had a few of Brooke's belongings. One of them was a stand with her guitar on it and a picture of her, and there was a picture of her and her dad together. And two of the biggest dragonflies I've ever seen in my life were right there. They were sitting on the guitar, they were sitting on the picture, they were fluttering around together. At one point, I saw one of them land on Amy's shoulder briefly, and I knew that was Brooke and her dad. They were there, they were visiting, they were attending her service together. They were all over through that place. My aunt finally got my attention, who is in no way metaphysical, and she pointed him out and she said, "Do you think that's Brooke?" And I said, "I do. I know that's Brooke. She was just there." But I've never seen dragonflies that big before that, and I've never seen dragonflies that big again. They were enormous. But the way she kept landing on the flowers on the casket, the guitar, the picture, people, was just fabulous. One of the most interesting things I've ever seen at a service like that. And yes, R.I.P. Brooke. She deserved a whole lot better than she got. All right, let's talk about scarab beetles. We've all seen the iconography from the Egyptian uh, tombs and artwork, right? Ancient Egyptians saw scarab beetles as sacred symbols of resurrection, immortality, protection, and the movement of the cosmos itself. Pretty interesting. Egyptians watched dung beetles rolling balls across the desert and connected them to the sun moving across the sky. That's where that idea came from. At least that's what the tales say. The scarab became associated with the god Khepri, a solar deity tied to rebirth and renewal. Scarab amulets were placed in tombs and worn as protection in both life and death. We know that carvings of scarabs appear in ancient art all over Egypt. Pretty interesting. How about fireflies? I have never seen a firefly. I mean, I have on TV or in videos or whatever, but in real life, we don't have them. And I've really never spent any time in the South where I might come across one, but I've never seen a firefly. And it's actually a bucket list thing for me, you know, because I'm a bug dork. Fireflies are tiny lanterns. They have appeared in folklore around the world uh, for good reason, right? In fact, I'm reading a book series right now that the premise of the book is that there's two worlds, that there's our world, which is known as the Bright Lands, where we have sun, and then there's the shadow world, where they don't have sun, and that every human that's born on the planet has a counterpart that looks exactly like them in the shadow world. And the shadow world is where things like all of the elementals occur. And that if a human sees an elemental, it's because they managed to get through one of the gates where humans can cross into the shadow worlds or shadow world or shadows world beings can pass into or magical beings can pass into the Brightlands. Anyway, there it's just a novel, a series of books. They're fun, but anyway, reason I bring that up is because in the book, and this is actually true historically in mythology too, the the fireflies are known as the will o' the wisp, at least in this book. And what the willow wisps, the wisps, are known as are spirits that have never had a chance to be born. Now we see them as fireflies. Interesting. So, why have we spiritualized insects? I think it's because they embody the same things that we are working on all the time, right? They're living examples of the stuff we're trying to understand. I mean, the whole human condition, we don't know. Some people think they know. Some religions will tell you that this is the absolute truth. Other people will tell you that there's is nothing, you're nothing. When you're done, you're done. Lots of different theories and ideas out there about why we're here, who we are, what we are. Insects with their all of the interest, with their short life cycles, uh, they're living examples of transformation, death, rebirth, collective consciousness, light, instinct, cycles, resilience. We know that over centuries, decades, well, millennia, that's probably a better word, that insects have changed, right? They evolved. They changed to be able to fit their environment. They have throughout millennia had to do that in order to survive. And that resilience is something that we can certainly emulate or at least take a look at and hope to be more like. We watch insects molt out of old versions of themselves. Have you ever watched an insect molt? That's an amazing experience. Uh, we have a peppermint shrimp in our big saltwater tank. And I mean, shrimp are just big sea bugs. They're essentially, well, bugs. And it's wild in that tank because you'll just wake up in the morning and you suddenly have two shrimp. Not really, but it looks like it because they literally just step out of their exoskeleton in their new with their new body intact. And the exoskeleton will just kind of hang around for a couple of days and eventually it falls apart and breaks down and it's gone. But initially, it looks like exactly the same thing. Have you ever seen a tarantula molt? That's fascinating. They have this button on their back that will pop off. And this takes hours, but the button will pop off. And then they'll start very slowly removing themselves from their own body, just stepping up out of it. And eventually they step out of their exoskeleton with their whole new body intact. And the old one will sit right there, and at least for a few days, look exactly like the old one, except for that button that popped off its back. It is crazy. But the molting is an amazing thing to see. It's not just an amazing thing to see, but it's an amazing thing to consider. That to me is alien shit, right? No. Animals like cicadas that vanish, or bugs like cicadas that vanish underground and then return at some point down the road, transformed with a whole new bloom of them. That's crazy. Insects communicate through vibration and pheromones. Large groups of insects, like bees and others, that communicate or that move together through that almost seems like telepathy, right? They know their place, they know how they move with the hive or with the flock or, well, with the swarm, right? Have you ever seen a swarm of anything? Everyone has their place and they stay in it. It's like one organism with millions or at least thousands of little organisms within it. Fascinating. Some bugs glow, some sing, some survive impossible odds. Again, cicadas. That one kills me. So fascinating. Bees communicate through dance. I think we all should. Maybe we should always fight through dance, right? I'd like to see it. Dragonflies have a nearly 360-degree view of the world from those big wild eyes. Certain beetles navigate using the stars. Crazy. All right, how about insects that find you? You know, the insects that come around you that are uncommon, that there's have no reason to be there, right? The ones that you really don't know at all why they came so close to you or why they were around you at all. Well, how about butterflies? They usually arrive during periods of transformation. This is a show of support. Not really ominous, right? Just a show of support. Dragonflies appear during emotional growth. Bees may come around to symbolize productivity, harmony, and abundance. Moths are tied to intuition and difficult truths. Fireflies represent hope and guidance, and so many others. And then, of course, like Brooke and her dad, many winged things. As a medium, I've heard this so many times from spirits that have passed or from clients that are like, okay, so check this out. The other day, I go outside and I was feeling really bad and missing my, person that had passed, and this butterfly just came and sat on my shoulder. Yeah, that is, I have heard that story or something like it more times than I can even count. That a winged thing, sometimes it's a bird that gets really close and hangs out, or taps on the door, looks in the window, that kind of stuff. But so many times it's a butterfly or a dragonfly. I have one client whose mom in the spring always comes through and says that she's so excited that it's butterfly time again because they're coming through these insects so that they can at least be close to you for a minute. So they can at least bring you a message, bring you some love, bring you some comfort. It's fascinating. But it's fascinating to me how I've heard this so many times, and not just from spiritual people or new agey people, but from people in my world who aren't any of those things, who are like, okay, this thing happened, and I keep thinking about you and thinking I need to tell you this and see what you think. Those kinds of conversations. And yeah, it's exactly what they think it is. So interesting. Okay. Kelly's article this week, she's talking about astrology this coming week and through June. So if you go over to her Patreon, you can see, and just click here on the pink link, that you can get to her weekly bitch scopes as well as her astrological predictions for the month of June and beyond. So you can go check that out. All right. My tip of the week is a chart about what insects are appearing to you and why. So you can learn more about all of them, but essentially, if you're seeing a butterfly, that's a sign of deep change, new beginnings, and becoming who you were meant to be. It could mean that your spirit is evolving. If you have bees, that could mean that it could stand for community, abundance, and purpose. You're being called to your purpose. Work together, stay focused, and trust that your efforts are creating sweetness. Abundance is near. If you see a moth, that could represent intuition, mystery, and inner work. Pay attention to your inner voice and the unseen. You are being invited into deeper truths, healing, and shadow integration. One last thing I wanted to say about moths. Don't you think it's fascinating that people are afraid of moths? People who can live with a butterfly around them, no problem, will freak out over a moth. I've been hearing this for years from people. Oh, I hate moths. Moths are horrible. Moths are scary. Don't you think it's interesting that moths represent your shadow self and it's something that we have been conditioned to be afraid of? But they also represent your spiritual power and your intuition. Something else that we've been conditioned to stay away from, right? Because honestly, seems like this is a topic kind of like spiders to me. Women are always afraid of spiders, and spiders are a power animal for women. Anyway, I just find it interesting. Dragonflies represent change, illusion, emotional growth. See beyond illusion. You're growing stronger, wiser, and more in tune with your true self. Adapt and trust the flow of life. How about ladybugs? Luck, protection, and joy. Good luck and positive energy are around you. Release worry and remember that life is meant to be enjoyed. Firefly, hope, guidance, and light. A reminder that even in the darkness there is light. Stay hopeful. You are being guided towards something beautiful. How about ants? Could that trail of ants in your kitchen have any spiritual meaning? Turns out, yeah. It could represent teamwork, patience, foundation. The message is to keep building. Your hard work, discipline, and small steps are creating a strong and stable future. How about a grasshopper? Leap, faith, and adventure. Take a leap of faith. You're being called to step outside your comfort zone and embrace new opportunities for growth. How about the scarab beetle? And I'm just going to include all beetles into this. Stink bugs of all sorts. They represent rebirth, protection, and cycles. You're in a cycle of transformation. Release the old and trust in new beginnings and eternal renewal. Pretty interesting. Oh, hello, Jane, and welcome. Ah, thank you. Oh, it's so sweet. To make it clear, since you were just popping in, Brooke died like 15 years ago. But yeah, thank you. Brooke was an amazing girl. It was very sad. Okay. Christy's energy exercise this week is the clear your bubble exercise. Lots of crime over at True Crime Squad. If you like true crime but you don't like the heavy stuff, watch the Criminals Extravaganza show. These were all funny crimes, not ones that will break your heart or make you sick. Lots of meditations over at Planet Meditation. And that is it. That is Luminous this week. So hopefully you found some gems in there. And that's what I'm thinking about. So I want to remind you that I am a professional psychic advisor over at when2listen.com. You can find me over there any day of the week on the phone lines, in chat. You can request a call back or a scheduled call if you want to do something bigger. There's also a function to purchase an email reading if you'd rather do that. Email readings are cheaper, and you can just ask a question and then I'll respond to you and send it back via email. And some people like to do that. Lots of ways to connect, but I am here for you if I can help you with anything. I do a lot of energy work on the lines. I do a lot of mediumship. I do a lot of animal communication, just general psychic readings. Sometimes you just need help making a decision or being heard, and I'm here for you. So again, that's one2listen.com, and you can just look for me, Katie Weaver. So that's what I've got. Thank you guys all so much for being here. Thanks for being a part of my journey. Always very much appreciated. I'll be back next week, same place, same time. Hopefully with a praying mantis in hand. We'll see. Have a great week, you guys. This has been yet another production of The Katie Weaver Show here on 1-2 Radio, where we're changing the way you listen to the world.